Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of 4K Garage. My name's Sam, and today we're going to be talking about power. But first, let's clear up some space, shall we? So here it is. That's right, I'm planning an engine swap. But before we go into what the plans of this are, let me explain kind of my thoughts for going with quite clearly what's going to be an engine swap. So I've always enjoyed turbocharged cars, as you may have seen from my history of the 86 video, where we had the V2 turbo, the Subaru as well. Love turbocharged cars, love that kick of boost and torque that you get. I wanted to hit a number in the 86. I'd say around 350, if not more, which is absolutely doable on the FA20 engine that's in the GT86, but it can take quite a bit of money to get there, and the engines themselves aren't really geared up for any kind of high boost application. The ceiling of boost that you can really run, be it supercharger, turbocharger or such, is really around 7, 8 or 9 PSI without having to open up the engine, build the engine, and likely lower the compression a little bit. You know, without that kind of high-ish boost of 18, 20, whatever PSI, it wasn't really what I kind of wanted. Not to mention after that, you know, then there's the worry of, is the gearbox strong enough, and is the engine itself strong enough? So then you ask the question, do I need to open the engine, do I need to change rods, pistons, if I'm going to do that? You know, how far do I go with it? Being myself, I wanted to do something a little bit exciting. I've built an engine before, I've done rods and pistons, so maybe I want a bit more. Maybe I want to do cams, maybe I want to do valve springs, maybe I want to do a stroker kit. All of that, you know, you can get some good kits out there that increase the displacement, give it some nice cams, and you can, you know, throw a load of boost at it, make 350, 400, 450 horsepower, whatever. But then having done some research into kind of all that, the kits available, the parts available, turbos and so on, came to the conclusion that it's fairly pricey. And then if you're going to start blowing up gearboxes, you're a bit stuck, apart from buying gearboxes over and over and over, or doing some kind of ridiculously expensive gearbox conversion. And at the end of the day, I thought to myself, I'd like to do something a little bit more interesting than that, a little bit more exciting, at least to me personally. I chose to do an engine swap instead. And as you can see, I've already bought the engine, so I've already got my foot in the door. But enough about that. I'm sure you're curious to hear, what is this engine? Now, to any American viewers out there, you're probably bored of hearing this, but this is an LS engine. Basically, an LS3, but more specifically, an L92. Now, to anyone that knows LS engines, this is all going to sound very familiar, I imagine. But just to give a brief history on LS engines, where they come from, why they're so popular, why they just tend to work, and just are fantastic for engine swaps, here's a little rundown. So the LS engine came about in, I believe, the early 90s, starting with the LS1 in Corvette. Can't remember which one, Google it if you really want to know. But it's essentially an evolution of the old small block Chevy engine. It's got a single cam, push rods, and 2 valves per cylinder. Quite old school. Even the modern LS is still pretty much that same formula. Pretty much all the parts between LS generations are interchangeable. And since that original LS1 in the Corvette, it's kind of evolved on there, went to the LS6 I think next, because that makes sense, and the LS2, and then onto the LS3. And they're kind of the main Corvette aluminium blocked series of LS engines. And branching off from those generations, you get various engines derived from those that were made for trucks, made for SUVs, things like that. And then it gets given a slightly different name. Often that name is Vortec, but specifically things like the LQ4, the LQ9, and so on. And the main difference between those engines, the truck-based engines and the car-based engines, is the materials they're made out of. So often the car-based engines are aluminium, nice and lightweight, and the truck-based engines are iron. And they have their pros and cons. The aluminium, as I said, is very lightweight. The iron is very, very strong, but the iron's heavier, but cheaper. And that's often, you know, as you can imagine, when you come into deciding an engine swap, they're the kind of factors you keep in mind. Now, regardless of which one you go for, they're all very small. If you look at this engine, it's not very big. If you think about it, it's got a single cam here, push rods, and no overhead cams, making it a very small package. A similar V8, say the Lexus 1UZ, they're quite a bit larger. The Mustang 5-litre Cozy engines are massive. And that's just down to the fact that they perhaps have a wider V or dual overhead cams, and that can just make them much more cumbersome at the top end, often out to here, coming out to there. That can of course be an issue when you're trying to fit these into various cars. Now of course the LS is an incredibly popular engine. They swap them into everything from classic Minis to MX-5s or Miatas, even into the 86 platform. Now that's all my reasons for choosing this, rather than say the Lexus V8 or the Toyota 2JZ, is essentially ease and weight, respectively. The Lexus 1UZ makes a lot of sense. It's essentially a Lexus Toyota engine, so it keeps it in the family and all that. But the problem with that is it's not been widely done. And as you guys know, I'd like to do pretty much all of it myself. And the main hurdle with the Lexus engine in the 86 platform is the fact that it runs CAN bus for its electrical systems. And that can just come to plenty of issues when you come to wiring and getting the thing to run and getting it to act like a normal street car, which is what I want. I'm after a normal street car. I'm not looking for a race car where you have toggle switches for ignition and fuel pump and start and all those things. I want to get in it, press the start button, car comes on, indicator stalks work, rev counter works, speedometer works. Simple. And so because of that, the 1UZ was out of the question for me. There's also the question of the K24, the Honda K24. Very good engine, very strong engine, can make fantastic power out of them with a turbo. But I just wanted something with 8 cylinders. I wanted more than 4 cylinders to make things interesting and a little bit fun for me, personally. And it's so simple as that. The other thing is the 2JZ. It's a Toyota engine, makes sense to, again, keep it in the family. Problem with those, personally, for me, they're fantastic engines, but they are a little bit old now, and they're very, very heavy. I think they're a bit over the 250 kilo range, whereas the FA20 engine in the GT86 is around 180 kilos, it's often thought to be. And that gets me onto this. So this engine, as you see it here, without intake, without alternator, without a lot of accessories and exhaust headers and so on, is 171 kilos. That's right. Currently, in its current form, it's lighter than the FA20. I'm sure, given those additional components, it will equal out or be a couple of kilos over. And of course, then the question is, it will generally have a higher centre of gravity. But not that I plan to make the 86 a track car, but having come from having a track car and liking that little performance, I like lightweight, and it makes sense to kind of go with this. Now, getting back to this engine specifically. So as I say, this is a L92 truck engine from the LS3 family. And what that means is the L92 specifically, although it's a truck engine, it is also aluminium, hence the lightweight, which means aluminium block, aluminium heads, all very lightweight, all very simple. The difference between this and say the LS3 is, well, for starters, for me in the UK, cost. These engines are pretty hard to come by in a used condition. Crate engines are multiple thousands of pounds. Of course, this wasn't cheap, but to give you a hint, a crate LS3 or a crate LS1 is more than what I paid for the car originally, being £4,000, 4K. So when this came up for sale, I just had to buy it. At least now I have the engine, I've got my foot in the door for this project, and hopefully circumstances don't change and one day this will be central place inside the engine bay of the A6. So I've got interesting facts and differences between this, the L92 and the LS3. So the L92 originally came from the kind of 2008-2009 Chevy Escalade or Silverado, things like that. So big trucks, pickup trucks, SUVs, that kind of thing. So the main difference with that compared to the car engines is it has an ever so slight lower compression. Don't quote me on it, but I believe it's around 10 to 1 rather than 10.5 to 1. So ever so slight less power, but also often has a great big truck intake on it, comes right up to here. And that's good for low down torque, where you're going to be pushing a very big heavy vehicle, you want that low down torque to pull it along. It also has VVT, which is around that era, 2008-2009, it's brand new for the LS engines. They were stuck to the guns, and no VVT or any of that kind of fancy valve trickery that you might get in other modern engines. And truthfully, I'm going to be ditching on this engine. VVT is a fantastic bit of technology that really just brings out more usable torque and power across the range of any engine. Unfortunately, it's not widely supported on these yet. There aren't a lot of VVT-based cams, and it's just an extra hurdle when it comes to tuning it and getting it working. But let's face it, if you're going to go with a V8, you may as well have a great big, lumpy V8 noise. Something like this. And so that, I need to get rid of the VVT, put in a normal car LS3 cam. And it's as simple as taking off all the front timing cover, changing a few components, the timing cover itself, the cam, and putting in just normal car-based components. Very simple. When I get close to the time, I'll start going through exactly what I'm going to be replacing and what with. Not so much as a guide, but I mean, these are just probably one of the best bang for buck LS engine you can get. Like I said, they're cheaper than LS3, but simply more powerful than the LS1, 2 and 6. And so that's the main differences. So essentially the idea is convert this to a car-based LS3, near enough, stick in the 86. So then you might be wondering, what's it going to make for power? Well, from my research, the Escalades and so on that this engine came out of are rated at 415 horsepower, which is an absolutely monstrous amount for the 86 chassis. But by the time I've changed the intake, changed the cam, might even have more. Might have closer to 470, 480. I don't want to say 500, but it's not out of the realms of possibility. Of course, all of these are at the flywheel numbers, or at the crank, as they say in America. So come to the at the wheels number, it'll be a bit less, but trust me, it's going to be absolutely more than enough power for the 86 chassis for what I plan to use it for. And that's the main question, really, what you plan to use the car for. As I want to do as much of the work on this engine swap as possible myself, I don't want to be that kind of guy to be one of the first people to do it. I don't want to find out what the hurdles are and how high they are. But when it comes to the ELS platform, there's absolutely heaps of information on the internet. There's kits out there from companies such as Sticky Manufacturing for engine mounts, gearbox mounts. When it comes to gearbox themselves, there's a few options. You could go with the bolt-on T56 or TR6060, although they are very expensive gearboxes in the UK. So I'm likely to go for a cheaper option such as the Nissan CD009. Often people will know it from the 350Z. Incredibly strong gearboxes, relatively cheap compared to the T56, and it's been done plenty of times in the 86 platform, and with a little bit of finessing here and there, some clearancing, it can fit nice and easily. And they have fantastic gear ratios for this engine and for this chassis. In a simple nutshell, that's my plan. Now, it's probably not something I'm going to be doing for a while yet. Of course, like with any engine swap, any engine work in general, especially when you're going for a hike in power, it's not cheap. And so I really want to spend time to save money or gather some funds, whatever way I can, to kind of jump into it in one go, rather than leave the car without an engine or without a drivetrain for months or even like a year. So don't expect to see this anytime soon. I'd love to do it, I'd love to tear out the engine right now and start it right this second, but I simply don't have the funds to do that. Don't expect to see that project kicking off anytime soon. I'm showing you this engine now, but it could be months, even a year before we start diving into the taking the engine out of the 86. But once I am able to save a bit of money, I would like to buy some components to start building this. The plan is essentially to leave the bottom end as it is. These engines are workhorses. They can do hundreds of thousands of miles with very minimal wear on them. It's often been known. So I'm going to inspect the bottom end and make sure I'm happy to continue running it as it is. I've already had a look, and it's all looking fairly healthy. All turns over very nicely. Let me show you that. As you can see, turns over very nicely, and you can hear all the compression stages of all the cylinders. So I don't think the bottom end is going to need any work. However, I am going to change the cam. I'm going to delete the VVT. I'm going to install the car intake. Got to do plenty of things to do with the fuel system. Going to change the valve springs to go along with the new cam. Probably end up, I need to do some upgrades to the rocker arms in this. And then things like hardened push rods, new lifters, and just a general refresh across both the heads. Get them tip-top and healthy, and then it's going to be wiring it. Now that's going to be the biggest hurdle for me. I'm pretty confident saying I cannot wire a car. So there are a couple of wiring kits. There's plenty of information out there. What I'm likely to do is probably talk to some wiring specialists and tuners closer to the time when we need to get it running and see really what my options are. Whether I try and tackle it myself with a pre-done wiring loom and a aftermarket ECU, or simply taking it to a specialist and learning from them and going through them what the options are, what we can and can't achieve, and finding out what the deal is essentially. Of course, the benefits of that second option is I have some support in the future. If anything does go wrong, if I want to add anything to the car, features-wise, sensors-wise, etc., and I have that backing of a business to kind of help me out with that. So that's likely the route that I'm going to be going down. But everything else, mounting in the car, I'm hoping to do myself. And that's, like I say, why I chose the easy platform, the LS. So there we have it. Like I say, probably not going to be getting onto this anytime soon, unfortunately, but that's the plans for power when it comes to the 4K86. So as always, guys, hope you enjoyed this episode. It's one I've been really looking forward to making. I hope you stick around to see the outcome of this when it eventually gets done. Hopefully it can be done sooner rather than later. But like I say, much of like most things in life, it's all just a question of funds. Stick around. Let's see how it goes. Hopefully I can start getting some bits with it, start giving it a tear down, start inspecting it, giving it clean, things like that. I want to really take my time with it and have a really strong engine to go in when the time comes. So until next time, hope you have a good one. And if you enjoyed this episode, do all that good YouTube stuff. Give us a like, comment, or even subscribe. See you soon, guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.